Hi, my name is Karsten, and with me today is Ben Walden, who is a presenter and an actor, and who has had many leading roles on television and in theater. Ben created Contender Charlie, a company that uses storytelling and mythology to enhance and inspire the creative learning for young people. Today, he supports those who mentor, teach, and lead students, and his programs have become real fixtures, for instance, for the head teacher conferences around the world. Ben, I'm really happy that you're joining me today. I have some really interesting questions to ask you later on.
Pleasure to be here.
Great. So it seems actually, at least in theory, that schools are perfectly positioned in the midst of their communities to impact their communities in a positive way. The reality, on the other hand, oftentimes looks a bit different. The education sector gets criticized for being fragmented, for having lost the touch, and for not really providing the adequate guidance. Ben, could you tell me what can be done so that schools really can exercise and leverage their role in society and have the impact that they can have?
Well, in terms of the question that you asked there, Carsten, I think it's very important at the beginning to distinguish between the different parties that are involved in the running of schools and the teaching of children. It can be very fashionable in education to beat up on schools, to criticize standards. It's something that happens an enormous lot. Certainly in the UK, it can happen a lot. And one of the things that I've experienced is I think that so many teachers and so many people working in the profession are doing an amazing job. They are innovators, they are, many of them, outstanding communicators, and they have a real vision of education that is exciting and forward-moving and does an enormous amount for students. I think that a vital line to draw here is between the difference of educational experts in the field of actually working with kids every day and governments. And I think that there is a line there. It's one that I just can't help but notice, that governments like to draw up quite tight agendas as to how teachers teach. And I think that some aspects of those agendas are very misinformed and don't help those experienced professionals on the front line who are really better equipped to think, to feel, to notice and sense what might be innovative for kids. Also, who understand individual children in their classrooms better. So it's true that schools are vital centres of the community. I can't think of a more important centre to the community than possibly a hospital than a school. And yet I feel that sometimes, just as we don't trust students enough in their own learning, I feel we sometimes don't trust teachers enough in supporting them in that learning. And it's true that there are some teachers who are very conventional and old-fashioned and who like to deliver to standards that perhaps sometimes are a little dated for kids. But the vast majority, in my view, would like to do a lot more if they felt free to do so, and if they felt that they wouldn't be judged so harshly if they made any kind of error in terms of government curriculum and how it is measured.
So you're drawing this ecosystem between schools and governments, and it's probably true that the world that we live in is complex and uncertain and will continue becoming more and more complex and uncertain. And so it seems we are connected in ways that we've never been connected before. And yet, leaders around the world are struggling to find solutions to those burning issues that are plaguing societies around the world, such as youth unemployment, the climate change, the financial crisis, and so on. So coming back to this question about the education sector, in your view, how can the education sector actually help prepare the next generation of leaders to realize that, in fact, we are interconnected and that we actually are all sitting in the same boat?
Well, there, Carsten, again, for me, from what I heard in that question, two things come up that are very important, which is, firstly, are we preparing young people for leadership. See, I don't notice a class at school called leadership. I'm not saying there should be one. There are other ways we can teach leadership skills without it being a separate class. There are ways you can bring it into every subject, but I don't think it receives anything like enough of an emphasis. And I don't see how we're preparing kids well for the future if they don't take individual responsibility in the sense of seeing themselves as an innovator and possible leader. And I think there are many areas where we aren't always doing the greatest job there in terms of trusting them with their own learning, in terms of spotting the talents that really inspire them to want to lead something or show entrepreneurial skills that won't always come within the conventional curriculum. And to then help them begin to develop those skills through things like learning through adversity, understanding that not everything you try will immediately succeed, and how you gain and garner support for what you want to achieve. So if last week I was working with kids in Virginia around, we were talking about Steve Jobs, and I was reminding them that Jobs encountered significant adversity in this legendary entrepreneurial career he had, and his ability to survive it, learn from it, and develop from it was a key skill, a skill that I think we ought to be helping students within school. So the first thing is how we cultivate leadership at all, and are we focused on it? I sometimes, again, am dubious that this is always a focus and priority for governments in how they set curriculums, and I think it should be. The second thing is that my father was a politician. I've always been very interested in politics. I've always wanted kids to be politically interested without trying to feed them any particular viewpoint from one particular party line or another. And one of the things that concerns me is I think that we are regrettably naive to assume that everyone does accept that it's an interconnected world, and that everyone does accept that we have common problems that we all need to share and focus on. And indeed, the evidence from, for instance, looking at things like G20 summits is that they don't agree, and that national interests are still highly predominant, and that as a result, we don't often do enough to help each other in a more trans-global way. So again, it is about those at the top doing more to accept that we are very blatantly living in an interconnected world where what happens in one part of the world is very significant to another, and we all need to share responsibility for that. I feel, again, that that's something that sometimes students seem to see more clearly than adults.
Yeah, and I guess from an overarching perspective, competencies such as systems thinking, worldview, and the like are definitely things that kids of tomorrow need to be able to master. Staying on that point, and I'm fascinated by your answers just now. So, if government plays this critical role, what role do parents and communities play in actually fostering this kind of collaborative spirit, supporting schools or their communities and taking this vital step forward? Well,
I propose that we all play a role to some degree, though there will be some people who quite reasonably say, well, I don't have kids and I'm very busy and I can't do everything and my school is not a priority for me right now, which is, that's really understandable. But those of us who are parents, obviously parenting is the most important leadership role in my view that any person will ever do. Mm-hmm. So our own time and energy with our kids is very important. I question myself a lot about work because I travel a lot for work. Am I with my kids enough? Am I doing enough with them? And then the value, how we model our behavior is very important for them. And of course, our worldview will have a big effect on them in most cases, certainly when they're younger. But beyond that, I do think that, there are many pointers, people like Ken Robinson's talks on TED, Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind. There are many, many others who have talked about the skill set needed for the 21st century, the conceptual age, the promotion of entrepreneurial skills in the best sense of the word, not just for making money, but for innovation and for creativity and for kids living in a more and more complex world. These are vital skills, and I just think that we need to focus on those more. And I think many teachers would really welcome that. And for those teachers who don't, then obviously more can be done to help coach and to set reasonable targets around how they might look at that. But we need more visionary thinking, I think, in curriculum matters around what skills best for these children for the 21st century.
Excellent. Sounds a bit like we not only need schools for children, but also maybe schools for parents.
Yeah. For all of us. I mean, education is a lifelong thing. It's like psychological development. It never stops. It's a lifelong learning.
Yeah.
So, you know, also many of the models we were taught don't work for kids now. For instance, the way I was taught maths is not the way they're taught maths now. So I get the same answer as my sons, but from a different teaching method. And I think that there are many areas now where our knowledge of the world and the way the world works has developed. And those who set the curriculum are not always embracing the full reality of the young people they're working with, and they're only there to try and serve them.
Okay. Good. So let's wrap up. I heard you say that it is important that we kind of reach out and come together, because it's a pretty tough challenge that we're facing. But we can't do it alone. Governments can't do it alone. Schools can't do it alone. Parents can't do it alone. So actually, there's a real need to realize we're in this together. And if we don't come together and we don't try and tackle these problems together, it's not going to work.
That's correct. And there's one other thing I'd say, Carsten, that I think is very important in all this, which is that ultimately it is, I think, partly about, while we support each other as communities, or need to, it is also about individual journeys and individual understandings. So for me, it is very important that young people and their teachers, mentors, question, who am I and what do I really serve? What is my real purpose here? Because it's my feeling that the more deeply a person understands themselves and their own motivations and their true nature, the more they can help liberate others in the world and also be better mentors themselves. So that old prophecy at Delphi, know thyself, is, I think, as every bit as modern to 2013 as it was to the ancient world. Some stuff never changes. And the more we begin to understand our true nature, and the more we focus on that and realize its potential, the more I think we're able to help ourselves and others. And I don't think there can be any more important topic for schools than that.
Thank you ever so much, Ben. This was really enlightening. I'm sure that our viewers will appreciate it and learn a lot from it. Have a great day, and thanks, Ben. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.